One of our big concerns the past couple of days seems to have been answered by John Horst, who had quite a bit to say in part two of his sit down with Eric Name. And another day, another guard the Bucks were linked to. We get to the details coming up after this on today's Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. You can hear me as the host and analyst on the Bucks Radio Network. You can find Camille on the Locked On NBA show and the Technical Foul podcast. We thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Since we last spoke, Camille, we had a chance to dig into part two of John Horst's interview with Eric Name. Myself and Van did a special Saturday show too, where I found the details of what the offset means and the cap situation for the Bucks and Damian Lillard. So if you missed that, go check that out, a Saturday dropping of Locked On Bucks. But let's get back to John Horst here. Didn't feel like we covered a whole lot of grounds in part one, and I don't mean that as a knock on Eric or John, but it was kind of focused on one thing, and Miles Turner, rightfully so. That was the biggest move of the offseason for the Bucks. But this was pretty wide-ranging in part two, and I'll go out of order here. We said in the open, one of the concerns appears to have been answered, and that was we brought up a couple of shows, hey, is AJ Green potentially a trade piece here? That if he signs an extension now, he's not eligible to be traded. He's a very valuable piece and a very low contract that would carry even more value as a sweetener of sorts. So the fact that they keep bringing in two guards, and as we mentioned, linked to another guard once again, is this something to keep an eye on? And in that interview, John Horst basically said no. We have had those conversations. I think he said it was the first conversation he had this offseason. I don't know about that, but he had a very early one with AJ Green's agent. AJ wants to be here. We want him to be here, and it's just a matter of finding the right fit. So there's at least that to be viewed as good news.
Yeah, like that there is still something going on between the two. Hearing John Horst mention that, the first day AJ was eligible, he made the call. Him bringing up the agent too, I was like, okay, yeah, you really are trying to get a deal done because, he's sitting there. I love AJ. I love his agent. We've made contact, and it could be a situation where, the Bucks have a number out there. And maybe AJ thinks that his play this upcoming season might be able to change that. Negotiations are happening at the moment between the two sides. But as long as I hear Horst make mention of the fact that the Bucks have an interest in him, they love AJ Green, they want him here. That's what I want to hear, because I think that he possesses a very, very valuable skill set for this Bucks team. A young guy that you kind of were able to watch grow because you brought him in as a two-way guy. Like, the story is there as well. So when you have a three-point shooter like that, you want to keep him around. Plus, the defense has been a bit better than we have assumed it would be from his draft profile. So yeah, that was something in that interview with Eric Name and John Horst that really stood out and made me happy to see.
Yeah, and again, we are not hoping AJ Green is traded. It's just pointing out, let's keep an eye on this because of the volume of two guards on the roster. But the quote from John Horst, which I think alleviates a lot of that concern, they made the contact. We've got the whole season to do this, to figure out a deal. We hope it doesn't take that long, and I think they hope it doesn't take that long. But as the dust starts to settle on a pretty busy offseason, that is the next most important thing for us to figure out with AJ. And I know he feels the same about trying to figure it out with us. So reading between the lines here, it was we made the contact early and said, look, we want you here long term. We got to go work on some of these other things. So don't feel like we're ignoring you. We just got to settle these things first, and then we'll circle back.
order of operations. They are important in the offseason. So as long as AJ Green understands what the Bucks plans are, they made it known of like, hey, we really do value. We hope we get it done. We just had to make sure we got these other things taken care of, as you said, like you like that level of communication so that players aren't in the dark. There's no surprises there. And again, making AJ Green feel like he's valuable. And on top of that, too, like if AJ has been listening to just Bucks media conversations, I'm sure he's heard Doc Rivers speaking very highly of him in the media, talking about how he thinks he's going to have a big year along with Gary Trent Jr. and singing his praises too. So I'm sure he's seeing like the Bucks are putting out there publicly how much they enjoy having AJ on the team, how valuable they think he is, and also like that there's other levels for him to hit still in his career that they are encouraged about him actually doing.
One of the other interesting things had to do with the backcourt and basically every player that the Bucks retained here, the backcourt and the front court. I did think it was funny his back and forth with Eric Name. Eric saying, I think it was kind of a foregone conclusion that Bobby was going to be back here. Most people assume that. And John Horst joking, like, I'm glad you felt that way because we didn't. And it certainly made for some nervous nights early in or the lead up into free agency. But they brought back the whole group. And a man after my own heart, John Horst, talking about data and sample sizes. And the big thing was you want enough of a sample size where what you're viewing is not a bet, it's a certainty. And he acknowledged, I don't think we have that with this group that we put together, but I really like what we have. And albeit small sample sizes, when you look at some of those groups that we threw out there together and those four names that we talked about, having on the floor together, AJ Green, Gary Trent Jr., Giannis, and Bobby Portis, or you put in Kevin Porter Jr. as well, that those were among the best four-man lineups. It was the best four-man lineup in the playoffs against the Indiana Pacers. And that was one of the other themes that John Horst really hit on in that. I know it's not a huge sample size. We love the way this group looked down the stretch when we didn't have Damian Lillard because of the blood clots. We love the way that they competed in the playoffs. Granted, it was only 5 games and didn't go as long as you would have wanted, but we think there's something there with this group and that we'll get that larger sample size that'll back it up this season.
Yeah, and that's going to be fun to watch. Again, like I can see and understand why people look at what the Bucks did in the offseason and are like, they just brought everybody back. Like it did not work out that well last year, but it's really like a litmus test of how much Bucks basketball you watch, because the idea of bringing these guys back is to play in a way that we only got to see over the course of 8 games that really in like the regular season or so, a few games in the regular season, and then in the playoffs here. So again, it is a very small sample size, but you can see the outlines of why this could be effective with Giannis running the point. And the other piece around that, because the guard rotation, I feel pretty good about on this team, with Giannis being the guy who's the main initiator. But he mentioned Kyle Kuzma too, which you can't run away from that aspect of it, because we have been talking about the Bucks just lacking some size a little bit on the wing at that 3 position. But Horst made mention of the fact that he thinks that, Kuz is really good at the 4. And that they should do a little bit more of trying to get his minutes there.
Yeah, I want to save that for its own segment because it was pretty interesting to hear him talk about the trade and Kyle Kuzma. And again, you can do a lot of reading between the lines there, but his point was we're betting on these guards and we think they're more than just shooters. The other thing that stuck out too is saying Gary Trent Jr. had his best 2 games of the season in our most important 2 games. And I know you can quickly point to the final 30 seconds of that, but Gary Trent Jr. was phenomenal. He said AJ Green was as well. And that says a lot about those guys that didn't have a ton of playoff experience. And they were at their best in closeout opportunities in those type of games against a team that eventually went on to the NBA Finals. So he certainly believes in this group they've assembled in the backcourt and was the first to admit, not a huge sample size, but we bet on it. And I think it's going to prove to be the right move for us. That brings us to the front court. And the name that you brought up, Kyle Kuzma, he had a lot to say about Kyle Kuzma. Van and I talked a little bit about Kyle Kuzma over the weekend. Everybody out there has thoughts on Kyle Kuzma. So we'll get into that conversation and what this upcoming season looks like for Kyle Kuzma coming up after this. Well, if you've ever wished managing your money could feel a little bit easier, Monarch Money is here to tell you it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money's more than just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So, in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. You're managing that money with a partner and have some shared finances. Monarch Money makes it easier than ever to stay on the same page. Track your spending, track your saving, and set some long term goals individually and with a partner. If there's one financial goal you're meaning to get serious about, maybe you want to buy a new car, buy a new house, Monarch Money has all the tools to do that as well. And they help you take a look at where all your money is going, things that add up fast, food services, subscriptions, helps you get a hold on all of that. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Kyle Kuzma. So John Horst was asked about him. And again, I'm just going to point this out. Van and I talked about it over the weekend.
Mhm.
All those moves kind of get lumped into one. That the Bucks made a flurry of them at the trade deadline. You bring in Kevin Porter Jr., you bring in Jericho Sims, you bring in Kyle Kuzma. The reality is the Bucks could have made the other two moves without trading Chris Middleton because you were doing a like for like in terms of salary in those trades. You would have been under or over the second apron. You could have made a trade on draft night to get under with Chris Middleton as an expiring contract then. I don't know what that's going to net you, if it's going to be more than Kyle Kuzma, especially if it's another second half of the season where Chris Middleton is battling injuries and isn't on the floor quite as much, doesn't have the impactful run that he had against the Pacers last year. Who knows? But in the here and now, it gave you that flexibility to do all the things the Bucks did in this offseason. There's been a lot of Bucks fans that have been quick to insert Kyle Kuzma in any trade. Kyle Kuzma in the 2031 first-round pick for this. Cam Johnson was the apple of everyone's eye for a while. The message you get from John Horst is we're not looking to trade him. We were intentional and talked about this a lot when we did it at the deadline. He was a target of ours, and nothing has changed there. He gives us a chance to play fast, gives us a chance to be huge, play different lineups. He's a plus defender at multiple positions. And a guy that offensively, when he plays with confidence and plays within the flow, is very impactful. I think that was a very, very interesting, accurate, and important caveat that John Horst added at the end there.
He had to. And he went on to admit, like, yes, we know Kyle struggled. He hadn't been in the playoffs in quite some time. We understand that. And what also stood out to me outside of the part that you mentioned was just Horace mentioning, like, I think the biggest thing with Kyle is just getting the familiarity, working with our coaches in the offseason, being part of the training camp, and just really building into a system where he understands where he's going to get his looks, how he can have his impact, and where we can understand him better. He's a very, very good at power forward. And so I think getting him more minutes at the four is going to be helpful. And that's kind of what we've thrown out there of like, where are Kyle Kuzma spots on the court? What is the most effective way to try to use a Kyle Kuzma? And once they can figure that out, put him in better positions to try to succeed. Like you can give him a fair shake, because I can understand looking at this time after the trade deadline as like all right, there were a lot of different factors at play. Like he struggled. We can't overlook that aspect of it, but we think with a bit more time, he can assimilate a little bit better into the system and be a plus player. But saying that the minutes for him, like he's good at the four, we've thrown out before. And I think the everydayers will remember of just, what if he does come off the bench and he's like your Giannis light? Like you use him in some of the ways that you use Giannis, which is trying to have him play make a little bit, but more so for Kyle Kuzma offensively, cutting to the rim, being the guy who's around the dunker, just kind of using him as a cutter, letting him initiate in that way. And if minutes are at the 4, then maybe he is somebody who does start the season coming off the bench.
Um, I know what you mean, and I don't disagree, but I think we got to be really careful with Giannis lights and Kyle
Yes.
Kuzma
Yeah,
there.
you know what I mean. Not saying
Yeah,
he's Giannis, but the way you utilize him would be similar to Giannis.
I mean, I don't really know what to make of that one in terms of what does it mean for Kuzma's position on the team? Like John Horst saying he's very, very good at power forward, so getting him more minutes at the 4, I think that's gonna be helpful. Well, does that mean let's try to get him some more minutes there because he's already gonna be starting with the 3 for us, or is this let's look to use him exclusively at the 4? And, if that's the case, we've talked about, hey, you feel great about your front court with
Mhm.
Giannis and Miles Turner and Bobby, and you bring back Jericho Sims. We'll add Kyle Kuzma there as well as a player coming off the bench. And Jericho Sims can be a situational guy, or Bobby can, and it just gives you a ton of options there. So I'm curious to see. I know when we threw the question out there a couple shows ago about, hey, who's going to start at the 3 for the Bucks? A lot of the consensus that we got was, I mean, you're clearly on something if you don't think it's going to be Kyle Kuzma. I would say before I read this, I would have said, I don't know that that's true. After reading that, that's my take is, well, he's going to be our starting 3, so we got to look to get him some more minutes at the 4.
I mean, it could be that. It could be that. And I get it too. Like, we've mentioned that his name comes up a lot in Bucks trade, scenarios, hypotheticals, and whatnot. And I think large part of it too, outside of the fact that he struggled last season, it's just the contract, like just where that contract number sits, where you're like, you can bring back something somewhat decent, around that $20 million mark. So I think that's also part of the calculus. But for him on this team entering in a training camp, that's the piece that I can't wait to see how positional battles shake out, because we heard Horace mention which lineups they saw the data. Hey, when
Yeah.
these guys are on the court, this is your best look. Kyle Kuzma is not a
Well,
part of
because,
that.
yeah.
So do you lean more into that going in training camp thinking this is where we're going to start? Kuz, you got to earn that spot while we battle it out. Or are you going into it saying like, things didn't work out the way we want. We like the jumbo looks. We are going to start Kyle Kuzma at the 3. Someone has to come and throw him in that way. Like, that's a battle in training camp, and just hearing how things shake out, I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously would like a lot more production and efficiency
Mhm.
at that contract figure. Having said that, it's not like it's a horrendous contract. I think there's certainly worse that are out there. And I mean, in no time, it's a descending contract too. That $20 million figure, which is the final year of his contract, I mean, that's going to be the mid level in probably 2 years.
It's crazy
Um,
to think about.
so that's just for context of where it's slided up against. I also think, we heard John Horst say this at the time that they acquired him, that it wasn't just an edict to dodge the tax and
Mhm.
to get under the second apron. Like, this wasn't the ownership group saying that. Um, he didn't say that had nothing to do with it, and it clearly did. And they needed that for the flexibility to pull off the moves that they did this offseason. But he kept pointing out, we targeted Kyle Kuzma. That was a player that we looked at and said, we think this fits what we want to do. We want this guy on our team. So I look at that. I look at the fact that 1 year away from an expiring contract.
Mhm.
But to me, the big thing is you mentioned, it's easy to kind of look at that salary and see what you could bring back with that. Yeah, I mean, it's business 101. Do you sell at the lowest point? And that's
Right.
where Kyle Kuzma's value is right now. So I do think you have to come into this with the expectation that Kyle Kuzma is going to be a part of this team. We're going to find the right role for him. We're going to get him more comfortable. And mentioning that John Horst was going to be out there visiting and spending some time with Kyle Kuzma. Doc Rivers is going to do the same thing as well. Kyle Kuzma's been back in Milwaukee. I've seen the videos of him working out at UWM.
Mhm.
So I'm sure they've already had some of those meetups, but you have to invest in him and raise his value. Number one, in the short term, to give you that asset on your team to help you in the here and now, but also to raise his value even more so as an expiring contract, if that's what it ultimately comes to, because that's where things get very interesting is next summer. If you
Mhm.
have an expiring contract that's $20 million and you have the ability to have 3 draft picks where you can trade 2 picks and a pick swap in 31, 32, and 33, that can fetch you a lot in terms of the contract value you can bring back and those picks that you'd be attaching. So I don't anticipate anything to happen with him. I didn't really think we would see anything happening with him because of, again, his value was probably at its lowest. But especially now that we're more than halfway through the offseason, basically, Kyle Kuzma's here to stay.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, at least for the now. At least for the now, and I don't think that's a bad idea. Like, to your point about the value proposition of selling low on Kyle Kuzma right now, like, we did see some flashes of good things that Kuz did from the defense. We were like, "Oh,
We
I didn't
had
know
a
he had."
24-point quarter or whatever it
Right,
was in
when
game
he got
82.
hot. He was hot. So, like, there are some things in this game where you're like, I'm kind of interested in seeing if we can find ways to get more of this. Efficiency, I think, is the biggest thing for him offensively. And then on defense, making sure he's in just the proper condition to be able to withstand whatever the assignment's going to be for him. But yeah, ultimately, again, we mentioned it the last time we talked about part 1 of this interview that Eric did with John Horst, but make sure I head to The Athletic and check out
Yeah.
part 2 because there's so much more in there that we didn't cover. Eric did a phenomenal job with John Horst, so make sure y'all head to The Athletic and read the article as well.
And again, the money quote, when he plays with confidence and plays within the flow, is
Mhm.
very impactful offensively. I mean, the defense, there's no disputing that. We talked about that quite a bit last year when you saw the impact that he made there. And that's a big reason why I think their defense is going to be much improved. Even if Pacers fans or Bucks skeptics can point out, well, Miles Turner doesn't rebound and he's not the defender that he once was. I mean, you're the same ones that complained to me that Brook Lopez only had 4 rebounds a game. So we're used to it, right? But the big thing is, we'll pivot to more guard talk here in a second. The big thing is, I hesitate to even say it because I don't want to sound like it's picking on a guy or piling on. You don't have that guaranteed weak spot that teams are going to pick at defensively with an undersized guard in Damian Lillard back there. So that is step number 1, where I think their defense is going to be improved. And again, it wasn't the defense of 2 years ago. It wasn't like it was super problematic. So I think they're in a good spot there. It's just finding that efficiency on offense. We mentioned more guard talk. And that has kind of been the theme for the Bucks this offseason, the players that they have signed and retained and the names they've been linked to. There was one more over the weekend. We'll get into that coming up next. Camille, what are your thoughts on Marcus Smart?
Just in general, just off the cuff.
Take it however you want.
Um, he is such an annoying player when he is healthy. The Marcus Smart in Boston just annoyed the crap out of me having to go against him. But I would imagine somebody who, when he's on your team, you enjoy rooting for because of the way he plays with the energy that he does. Even in Washington last year, which I watched far more Washington games than I thought that I would after the trade
Yeah.
deadline.
Yeah.
But when he was out there alongside Chris Middleton too, like, you saw just some winning ways. Like, again, he's had a tough couple of years here with the injuries, but you can squint and still see, like, this is a player worth taking a flyer on because it was just 3 years ago he was Defensive Player of the Year.
Well, I mean, yes, he won the award. He was not the Defensive Player of the Year
I'm not
that
going to
year.
argue on that point at all.
It's hard to believe he's 30 because I would assume that was like 34 with how long
Mhm.
we've been talking about Marcus Smart and his play style. But we bring up the name because he was bought out by the Wizards, which was a little interesting because we had kind of heard all along Marcus Smart, Chris Middleton, CJ McCollum, these are guys they're not going to buy out, but they're hoping to kind of rub off on their young guys and help them build a winning culture, but then also maybe increase your value while you're doing that so we can trade you at the deadline. But not the case for Marcus Smart. So he is bought out and reportedly going to be signed by the Lakers. We bring it up because I don't remember who the third team was, do you? But it was the Lakers, a third team,
The
and the
Knicks.
Bucks. The Knicks, okay. The Bucks, though, checked in, had conversations with him, and were interested in Marcus Smart. I mean, we talked about feeling pretty good about their front court, but it is truly something that every single free agent or guy that the Bucks have been linked to has been a guard this summer.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're just like, listen, we are trying to figure out what's going to work best here. This is what we're thinking. Again, Smart projects too as a guy who's more of a combo guard than like a straight up point guard. He's a great point of attack defender. Well, at least he has been when he's healthy, and you still saw some of the flashes of it in Washington to end the year. But like, he's another guy where it's like a combo guard. So they have really been exploring the market, which is why like all the Chris Paul talk was more interesting, because he's more of a pure point guard. And we've talked about the fit of that. But for Marcus Smart, I think the Lakers makes a lot of sense because he might start for the Lakers. Like, I was thinking about and kicking the idea over on Locked On NBA. I was like, will they sit like Rui Hachimura instead and just slide Smart in there, move LeBron up? Or do you keep it the way it is and bring Smart off the bench? Because like what the Lakers need is point of attack defense, especially now with DFS off to Houston. So like, it's interesting to think about how they utilize them, but I can see again why he picked the Lakers of those situations, because even in Milwaukee, we've mentioned the guard rotation here. You come here like, is there a guarantee that you are going to get that guaranteed playing time over what Milwaukee already has established?
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers, I think, presented the best opportunity for him because more of a desperate need there, as you mentioned, a point of attack defender. And again, and that was the other theme that John Horst mentioned in his interview. Like, are you sensing a trend here that he kept talking about the age of 25 and 26 for these guys? So, you know, if you're Marcus Smart, you look at the Bucks and you say, well, I'm joining Kevin Porter Jr., Ryan Rollins, Gary Trent Jr., AJ Green, Gary Harris,
Cole
Cole
Anthony.
Anthony. I better be really good because that's my avenue to minutes here. So, yeah, I get it for going to the Lakers. It was just interesting of like, man, another guard. So we've had Marcus Smart, we've had Chris Paul, we've had Bradley Beal.
Yeah.
You name it. If it's a guard that hits the market, we threw out Cole Anthony at the start of free agency. Like, hey, I wonder if the Grizzlies will buy him out. That'd be a great fit for the Bucks. So it's just guards. And, you know, the interesting thing or the noteworthy piece from that is their roster's at 15 guys.
Mhm.
And they were interested in Marcus Smart 2 days ago. We talked about it over the weekend with Van, too, about do you think the 15 guys under contract are who are going to be under contract for the Bucks going into opening day? Again, I'm not calling for anyone to lose their job or saying I hope so. It's hard to see that being the case when you continue to see the Bucks checking in on other guards when their roster is full and they've put off the guarantee dates for a guard or small forward on their roster and Andre Jackson Jr. until what? It's the day before the season?
I believe so.
I think. I mean, let's just rip off the band. Do you think Andre Jackson Jr. is on the roster on opening night?
No. Unfortunately, I do not. But if he is, again, I understand why, because he has shown certain skills with the defense, the size, being 6'6", 6'7", athleticism. But again, you've seen the summer league this year, which it wasn't something that wowed you. And we've talked about how his game doesn't necessarily scale up in summer league, but still the decision making at times wasn't where you wanted it to be. The aggressiveness at times on offense wasn't where you wanted it to be. And sometimes, again, the decision making just off ball just wasn't where you wanted it to be for him. But there are some tools there, and like I could see if things don't shake out, the Bucks being perfectly fine, being like, yeah, Andre, let's see what you can do. Let's see what you can do in training camp going forward. But with rumors we've been hearing about the Nassus, with the fact that they had the interest here in Marcus Smart, like the fact they moved that guarantee date to as close to the start of the season as you could. Having that flexibility doesn't mean you're going to utilize it. But to me, it screams out like we have it for a reason and we're going to explore every option until we get to that date.
Yeah, I mean, if he's on the roster, is it the tools that you referenced, or is it because hey, we tried and like everything else we tried just didn't come together? So congrats, you're on the team. I mean, and I don't mean it as a knock on Andre Jackson Jr. because there's clearly value there defensively, but as you just mentioned, we said coming into the offseason, even before the playoffs had started, like this is a big summer and training camp for Andre Jackson Jr. because
Mhm.
you can play on one end of the court, but you got to raise your offense above negative. It is a negative value offense. We got to see something, find something that works and lean into that. And I look, summer league is not the barometer for success,
Correct.
but same things we said about Chris Livingston. I'm like, hey, this is what you should be seeing from a guy that's his third go round in summer league. Same thing for Andre Jackson Jr. Like we needed to see that Chris Livingston path, and we didn't.
Yeah, we didn't. And it was similar to conversations we had last year with Marjan, where I don't necessarily think that the summer league outing from Andre Jackson Jr. Was as bad as Marjan's was last year because Ajax had some moments there when he did shoot the three, like it was very quick. He knocked him down.
Yeah.
So like there were some things in this game where you can see like, okay, again, the flashes of why it's like if he's on your roster come start of the season, you're okay with that because you can see an outline there. But ultimately, it wasn't one of those performances where it's like, man, what an off season that he had. Like you can see the work I can see the growth in his game. It has jumped. Like we haven't seen the jump. And maybe that's just because it was summer league and maybe you see something better in the regular season. But going off of what we've seen so far, it just hasn't been there consistently for him.
I'm officially worried for Andre Jackson Jr. if we start to see talk heating up of like Bucks showing interest in Malcolm Brogdon or Bucks have revisited conversations with Russell Westbrook. Like then it's probably time to say, when does my lease end in the like I should probably start to find out those types of things. That'll do it for today's show. So leave your thoughts in the comments again. I think we know where people are going to come down, but who's the starting three for the Bucks? Is it Kyle Kuzma? What do you take from the way John Horst worded things in that interview with Eric Name? And I suppose the same thing I asked you and I asked Fan Fias as well. We'll ask the listeners here and the YouTube viewers. 15 guys that are on the roster right now. Is that who the 15-man roster is going to be on opening night sometime in October? We find out the schedule in 3 weeks from now, so it's already starting to get to that time. That'll do it for today's show. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.